The whole bag will be inside another bag, and in that bag will be another bag. So that's my plan for packing. Hi, my name's Mark and welcome to the channel. Today I am packing up, doing my absolute final packing for 6 weeks on the road in the United Kingdom. I'm taking lots of projects with me, all of the tools, everything I could think of that I might need, and I'm going to walk you through what I'm taking and how I'm packing it. Let's get into it. If you haven't been here before, welcome. My name's Mark. I am a crafter, a knitter, crocheter. I'm also a musician, and a lot of what I do in life requires me to travel. So I've talked about travel before on the channel. One of those videos is about what you're allowed to take onto planes, what you're allowed to have in checked bags, at least here in the United States with TSA. And I also talk about how I pack, specifically how I take these sensitive items, things like scissors, knitting needles, darning needles, T-pins, things that are sharp and could be considered dangerous, how I pack those things so that they stay safe in my luggage and I think in a manner that gets you through security without any extra fuss. So if you're interested in those videos, you may have already seen them, but you can go find those on the channel. Today, I am doing my final packing for my big United Kingdom adventure. If you've watched any of my recent videos, you've heard me talking about this trip. If this is the first time you're seeing me, I'm spending the next 6 weeks in the United Kingdom for a variety of reasons. Part of it is to sing with a church choir. Another part is a music competition with my husband towards the end of the trip. And in between that, we're doing lots of sightseeing. We're going all the way up through Scotland, taking the ferry to Shetland, and then making our way back down, ending up in the southwest of England by the sea. So I'm excited for all of the travel, the sightseeing, but I'm also nervous and anxious. I get nervous and anxious about basically everything in life, so this is no different. I'm going to be gone for a while, so my every day will look a bit different, my schedule, my surroundings, and I also have to think through what do I want to have with me for this extended trip. So of course I've whittled down my clothes. I don't need that much. We'll do laundry during the trip, whether we go to a laundromat. We're staying in a couple of places that have in-unit, in-house laundry. So that's not the trickiest part of this. The trickiest part is that because we're singing at a cathedral for a week at the beginning of the trip, and then at the end of the trip participating in this music competition, we need some specific attire. We need black dress shoes, we need tuxedos, we need a couple of suits. So that's the bulk of the clothing I'm taking. The rest will be a couple pairs of trousers, a handful of shirts, and then I'll wash those things and probably repeat a lot of the same outfits. Then I look at the crafting side of things, and several people have commented or written to me from the videos they've seen saying, remember Mark, you can buy things along the way. If you run out of knitting, you can buy yarn, you can start a project, which is totally true, and maybe I'll do that. But knowing myself, knowing how my mind works, knowing what makes me feel prepared and at ease is having some of this routine carried over. So I've been talking about projects that I want to make while on the trip, things that will be important memories that I can look back on and think, oh, I made this sweater while I was in Scotland, while we were taking these train rides and just soaking in so much of the countryside, whatever it is we're going to be doing. So you've seen some of these projects. So here we are. I'm going to show you what I've done to get those ready for the trip and then what else I need to take with me and the process I went through to tick off every box and make sure that I have everything I need for the trip. Fingers crossed. Only because this is how I have things laid out here on my desk, let's start by looking at the accessories, the extra notions that I need to take to do some of my projects and potentially finish some of the projects on the trip. And I may not finish anything. A lot of these projects will probably be things that I'm working most of the way through, and then I'll finish it up once I get home and have all of these projects done. Either way, in front of me, I have extra needles. This was important to me in my video about how to pack, what you're allowed to take through security when you fly. I talk about this, and some of these things have been suggested to me by viewers, and other things are just backup procedures that I've always done because it feels good to do it. So all of my projects have been started, and that was important to me. I wanted to make sure that I cast on my projects, knew that I liked the fabric I was making, I knew that the gauge was right, I didn't need to change yarns, change needle sizes, or rip back and start making a different size of the project. So I've started everything, and I'll show you where each project is. And I've gone through my list of what size needles I need, both needle gauge and cord length, and I made a list of what I wanted to have as spare. So I've got 2 sets of needles here, circular needles, both spare sets. One is a 5mm, one is a 4.5mm, and then I also have a cord here that I will need for one of my sweaters when it gets a little bigger. When I get to the larger part of the body, I'll transfer to a different cord. So all of these items will go into my checked bag, and they're allowed to be in checked bags. They're also allowed to be in my carry-on bag, but they're my duplicate set. So these are going to get packed up in one of my zip pouches so that they're all together, and they'll be packed kind of in the depths of my suitcase, hopefully where nobody will bother them and they can safely make it on the trip. And ideally I won't have to use these, but worst case scenario, I'll have them. I'll have them just in case. So the next items in front of me are all of the accessories. I have my favorite set of darning needles or tapestry needles. These are from Tulip. They come in a magnetic case, which I think is great. And inside I have a couple of T-pins that I keep. I need them to tighten and assemble my interchangeable needles, but the darning needles themselves are here. They're blunt tip, and this is the largest size, which is not terribly large. I can fit worsted weight easily through the eye of the needle, but if you like to use bulky weight yarn, this probably isn't the set for you. They go all the way down to pretty small. If I move that T-pin out of the way, you can see. So this is a small case. I could just take one singular tapestry needle with me, but I imagine if I did that, I would lose it. It would slip through the cracks of a pocket. It would fall off of a table or a tray table on the plane, and I would be without it. And I know there are yarn stores, wool shops where I'm going. That's a big part of what I'm doing. I'm going to go to a lot of shops. But if I already have the tools and I want to be knitting on the plane over every day, I don't want to have to pause what I'm doing to go find and buy another accessory. So these will go with me, and these are actually going to go into my sort of everyday zip pouch that I use for just assorted things. I keep tape measures, pens, tapestry needles. I take them with me everywhere I go, even though I may not need them. They just stay there. So that's where I know they belong. That's where they'll be. The next thing is tape measure, just mentioned. One of my favorites here, I just think it's adorable, just a normal retractable tape measure. And I'm taking a couple. I actually already have one in here, so yes, that makes 3 tape measures, which is kind of excessive, but don't worry about it. It's totally fine. The next thing, one of my go-tos that I always love to have on me, just in life, is a pair of scissors. These are from Bryce Spun, not to be confused with Bryson, Bryce Spun, and they're just a short pair of scissors. TSA says you're good to have scissors with blade length up to at least 3 inches. It might be 3 or 4 inches, but let's say a blade length of 3 inches. This is much shorter than that. So these are technically allowed. They're not my nicest scissors. These cost me about $6. I like that they come with a little sheath, just so they're not going to poke through or snag any yarn or fabric. So this is what I'll take with me onto the plane. I'm working on a project that requires a lot of color changes, and I'm snipping those yarns as I go. So I'd rather do that with scissors than just ripping the wool. But again, if these were to get taken away, I'd be okay. I could deal with it for the flight. But these are the ones I just keep on me because, again, they're not the nicest in the world, but they're a very good, reliable scissor. So into the pouch they go. Next up is barber cord or stitch saver. This is the silicone tubing. It's hollow, so it affixes right to the end of a needle. I'll show you on this little plastic needle. It literally slips over a needle tip and secures, so then you can slide however many stitches you need. You could slide all of your work onto stitch saver so that you could take your needles out if you needed to. If you were going through security wherever you are traveling and someone says you can't take those knitting needles through, you could have some of this ready, slide your project onto it, give them the needles, but keep your yarn, keep your project. So I have it for a number of reasons. One is like backup plan. If something happened to the needles and you need to switch them out, it's very easy to transfer your work by sliding it on and off of stitch saver. The other big reason is because I like to try things on. So if I'm making a sweater that's top down or bottom up and I get to a certain point and I just want to see how it's fitting, either circumference wise or length wise, I'll slide all my stitches onto a long enough piece, and then I'm able to try it on, stretch it out, and when I do that, I usually just tie the ends together so that no stitches will slide off. Super handy dandy for really anything, and I have a whole container full of different size pieces. I think I have at least 2 pieces in here that are 60 inches, so my circumference is about 50 inches, maybe 52 inches, and so my sweaters typically are no larger than about 54, 55 inches as I'm making them, so that's enough for me to slide everything onto it, try my sweaters on, and then keep knitting. So I always have like a scrap of it hanging out in my everyday bag, but for this trip I will take a larger container just so when the time comes I can try on these garments and get an idea of how they're going. All right, the next thing I just showed with that barber cord demonstration, this is a flexible cable needle. I think it's a yoga needle. They call it a yoga needle, like, you know, you're flexible in yoga. And it's made by Prym, P-R-Y-M. I like to keep this in my bag just because it's kind of all-purpose. It's, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what the millimeters here are. I have a needle gauge nearby, so let me just check. It is a 4 millimeter, a US size 6 needle tip, which I always think of a size 6, a 4 millimeter, as being a very standard size. It's one of my favorite sizes to work on. So this will be helpful for all of the projects I'm working on if I needed to correct a stitch, you know, pick up a dropped stitch, or do any sort of repairs. If you need to hold a few stitches temporarily, like a gusset for a thumb, anything like that, you could slide it onto these and then twist them up. So I just keep them in my bag. I'm not doing any cabled projects on this trip, and I like to cable without a cable needle, but still, for peace of mind, I keep this with me in my everyday bag because it weighs hardly anything, it's small, it's blunt on the ends, so it doesn't pose any trouble or threat to just have it with me. Okay, a couple more items. Crochet hook. Am I crocheting anything on this trip? No, but what if I really wanted to? What if I just needed to? What if I meet somebody and they've never heard of crochet and they just want to see what does it look like to crochet a stitch? I could show them because I have a crochet hook. So that's that. I have another set of needle stoppers. I was never a big fan of needle stoppers before. Oh, come on. There we go. I was never a big fan of needle stoppers because there's so many things you can do. You can pull your needles, you know, through your work. You can stab them back into your cake of yarn or your ball of yarn. Unless you just have an animal or a child that's going to go through your bag and pull everything out, most likely your stitches aren't just going to fly off of your needles in the middle of a project. But you really never know what's going to happen. So lately I've received a couple sets of needle stoppers as gifts, And they're cute. I mean, they have so much personality, which is fun. So I like to think of it as a good way to dress up your project. If you like having accessories, if it brings you joy to have a little pair of sheep or horses, sunflowers, footballs, cups of coffee. I mean, they make everything. So I have needle stoppers on all of the projects that are going into my suitcase or into my carry-on because this does seem like a good time to make sure that they are secured. So I've got an extra set of those coming with me. Another T-pin here. I forgot that I had a million T-pins in my tapestry needle set, so I'm not going to pack this extra one because I already have a couple. Then the last thing, which I think can be the most valuable, are stitch markers. And all of my projects that need stitch markers already have them in, and I'll show you that in a minute when we get to the projects. But I'm still taking just a few extra. I have like maybe 6 or 7 total here. If I were to find part of my project that had a mistake or a blemish, I could use a locking stitch marker to mark that spot once I find it. I could also add it in if I find that later I need a marker. The pattern tells me to put in another marker and I wasn't planning for that. I didn't read ahead. So it's good to just have a few in every bag. It's good to have them on hand. So I'm putting them all together so that they're linked. That way I don't have to do too much digging. And then that whole parcel will just go into sort of the everyday bag, which is getting pretty full, but that's okay. This is still small enough that I think I can easily put it into my sort of crossbody bag that goes places with me, or it can be in my bigger crafting bag. And if I feel like I'm going on some sort of excursion where I don't need this much stuff, I can pull out the items that I do need, and it'll be fine. Okay, so all of that packed up into a very slim parcel here for the backup needles, and a fairly lightweight parcel here with sort of every tool I might need for my crafting. And you might be thinking of something that you use all the time, and you might be shouting it out, Mark, what about this? Don't forget it. And it might just be a tool that I don't use because all of us approach our crafting differently. If there are things that you always have to have in your tool bag, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear. And they might be some of the same things I do, or completely different things that I've never thought of. And before I get to the projects, which if you're waiting for the projects, I'm sorry, you can always skip ahead and look at the timeline of what's coming in a video. But I'm just sort of clearing things out the way they're presented in front of me. Something else that I decided I'll bring is my maker's board from MakerMarkKnits. So this is a like craft paper board folio, and inside it is like a metal sheet, a lightweight metal sheet. It opens like a book, and it does magnetize closed. It's magnetic. So inside it, I've got magnets of all different colors, and then I also have a ruler, and the ruler is magnetic as well, which is fun. Behind it, and I have them turned over because they are copywritten patterns, are charts for a couple of my patterns. So I have the printed charts. Normally I look at charts off of my iPad, but because this is a long trip and I'm not doing my normal daily routine of knitting at home, I don't know that I always want to have my iPad with me, and I don't always want to have to prop it open and use battery, have to rely on that. So I thought, for the patterns I'm taking with charts, charted color work, I'll print those pages and I'll put them in my maker's board. So when I'm not on camera, when I actually finish this video and get everything ready for the flight, I'll turn these pages the correct way, and I'll keep my place of what row I'm on with the ruler by just sliding it up to keep track of all of that in the pattern. A lot of the MakerMarkKnits accessories are magnetic, which is fun that then they can stick to the maker's board. They have things like row counters. The needle gauge I used earlier is magnetic, but I think this is all I need. So I've got a few pages of patterns, my ruler, which I'm just going to use as a placekeeper, and then the magnets to hold everything down. And then the whole board props up. So once I'm actually set to work, I'll put my pattern up here and stick magnets on it, keep the ruler on it to show my progress, and then I can prop this up on my tray table, on a table on a train. If I'm knitting outside somewhere, in a cafe, wherever I am, I can set this up on a table, keep track of my pattern, and not have to rely on my iPad. I'll still have the iPad on the trip because I need it for some of the music things, but I don't know that I want to take it with me every day. Sometimes it might stay in a hotel or it might stay packed up in my bag, and this can be with my knitting. And the last accessory, the last thing that's not yarn or a project, is my bag. And I've decided I'm going to take my Paula bag. There's a video on this from last week, and it's my new bag made for me by Paula from Spinning Loft. And there's her logo. And as I said in that video where I showed the bag off, I think the seagulls are adorable. The color of this is beautiful, and it's a pretty big bag. It's got a gusseted bottom. I think I could fit 2 sweater projects in here at a time. Not that I'm going to carry my 2 sweater projects with me everywhere I go, but that's about the capacity. So here it is. I talked about the color before, saying that it's kind of a sage green. I'm wearing blue, and you can see next to me a little more of the contrast. So it's not just plain gray, but it's a very pretty, soft sage green. And speaking of bags, this bag will go on the plane with me. It'll sit under the seat in front of me so that I can knit and have my projects during the flight. The whole bag will be inside another bag, and in that bag will be another bag. So that's my plan for packing. I'm able to fit everything I need into a medium-sized suitcase, too big to put in the above head compartment, but I'll check it. So I have a checked piece of luggage with the tuxedos, with the backup needles, with, I don't know, heavy things that I don't want to be lugging through the airport. And then I have a very good backpack that I got myself for my birthday. So I've got my backpack, which will have mostly electronics. I'm taking my camera, a light, some tripods, my computer, my iPad, microphones. There's a lot of stuff that that I have to remember to take. And so I'll also have sort of like a duffel carry-on. And in the duffel will be my knitting bag and my everyday crossbody bag. And I think that's it. So I'll be able to check my bag in the airport. Hopefully it makes it where it needs to go. But if not, I've got the good stuff with me. I've got the knitting. So even if I don't have a change of clothes, I'll have my knitting. And that's all I need. So the projects. I've started each project and I have my little list here. I decided, with your help from a couple videos ago, that I'll definitely take my Christmas stockings. The first thing on my list is the Birdsong Designs stockings. I showed these in another video. A lot of people said this would be something really nice to work on during the trip because they are for my husband and for me, and a big part of this trip is our honeymoon. So I agree with that. I think it'll be really nice to work on those, something that becomes a family heirloom, something that becomes part of our traditions, and know that as I was crafting those, we were together enjoying this big trip. The next item is the Kerr sweater from Rebecca Clow. A lot of people in the comments said definitely do this because she lives in Edinburgh, and I'll spend, I think, kind of 2 parts of the trip passing through Edinburgh. I don't know if I'll get to cross paths with Rebecca. I would love that, but I'm excited to work on the sweater as I'm journeying through Scotland. The next item, I decided to take a third item just because I've started it, is a sea glass sweater. And before you jump to any conclusions, I am definitely doing a sea glass sweater knit along for this fall. It will most likely start in late September or more likely at the beginning of October. And I showed those colors in a video sometime this past month, and those are the colors I'm using. That's my palette, the Sweet Georgia new shades they released. They're the jewel tones, kind of vibrant rainbow situation. So that's my sea glass plan, and I'm doing the cardigan. I decided, since I'm going to do my first knit along or lead my first knit along, that I should really walk through the pattern before jumping into it with you, with anyone who wants to participate. So I cast on in a different color palette, different fiber, different weight for Megan, one of my very best friends, and that's what I'm going to take with me, just because the yarn won't take up too much space and I'll be able to work through that pattern. I'll be able to get any questions I might have answered before it's time for us to try to work through it together this fall. So if you saw the picture on my Instagram of a different color palette, that's what it's for. Some people said, oh, you abandoned the other one, or why did you change? So if you liked the other colors and you were excited about the jewel tones, that's still the one I'm doing. So don't fear. And if you're excited about the idea of a knit along, that makes me really excited. This is really the first official announcement. So there's nothing that I've shared yet, but in the coming weeks, I will share like a flyer about it on my Instagram. I'll make sure to post something here, and I'll have a place for you to voice interest. If you're interested in doing that with me, or you're kind of interested, I'll have an email or a link to follow for you to say, this is who I am and I want to be part of it, so you won't miss out. So let's look at each project that I've started, and then that's it. Then it's time for me to go finish packing, which I've really been putting off because I think it's stressful. So the first project I mentioned is the Christmas stocking, the Birdsong Designs stocking. So this is how much I've done. I did maybe more than I should have, but I wanted to cast on. I wanted to get into the chart. I think my goal was to do 10 rows of the first chart, and I think I've done 30 rows, but then I stopped. I said, okay, it's time to stop. I'm really happy with the gauge. I'm really happy with these two colors together. I'm using one skein of Sweet Georgia in the color Birch. And then my green, my olive, is from Scapia's Metropolis. The color is color 26, Dipok. So I have one more skein that I need to wind. I'm doing 2 of these stockings, one for me, one for my husband. And I know I'm running out of my first skein of green. I've got a lot of birch left here, but I just want to be prepared, and I don't want to get somewhere and have yarn that needs to be wound. So I'm going to wind one more skein of this, and I've got 3 more 50-gram balls of the green. So the spare, the backup, gets packed in the checked bag. This whole project is actually going to go in the checked bag. This isn't going to be an airplane project, just because it's a little more tedious. It's fingering weight with color work on a pretty small needle. So I'm happy to do this one on a long train ride and not in the air during a flight. So this is all good to get packed. Next, in front of me, I have 2 skeins of wool stock that are suspiciously close in color to my Metropolis. And let me pull the rest of the sweater out, and you'll see that the contrast color is suspiciously close to Birch from Sweet Georgia. And I did this without really thinking about it. This is for the Kerr sweater, which initially I wanted to do out of alpaca. I had a sweater quantity of alpaca and I was trying to find something for it. Some people warned me in the comments it might not work out, and it didn't quite work out. I talk about that in my swatching video from a week or 2 ago. So then I went to the yarn shop to see what else I might be able to use, and I decided to use wool stock, worsted weight, and this is one of my favorite colors, Wild Thyme, and this is another wool stock shade, Gravel Road. No. Yes. No. It's not Gravel Road. This shade is Driftwood. So I have Wild Thyme and Driftwood together, which is almost identical to my stocking colors. That's fine. So I started this sweater as well. I wanted to make sure to start it again So I knew that the gauge would be right. I wanted to be happy with the fabric. And because this is a sweater for me, I wanted to get enough of a start to be able to try it on and make sure that I'm making the appropriate size. If I were to start this on the flight and then get far enough in and need to try it on, I think that would be a very annoying thing to try to do on a plane. Annoying to my neighbors, annoying to me, annoying to everyone. So I have the top of this sweater started. The neck opening, you'll see the arm openings on the side, and I got as far as the very start of the color work, and I think I only did about 4 rows of color work here. So you'll see that up close. And I'm very happy with the fabric, I'm happy with the fit, and I know that I'm ready now to get on the plane and just work through however many rows of color work I can get through. I think this will probably be what I work on the plane. It's just 2 colors. The stitches are pretty big, so it feels like it moves quickly, and the chart is very straightforward. It's not near as tedious as doing the shaped color work of the Christmas stocking. This color work is much more geometric and it makes more sense in my brain, so it's easier for me to get through each row with interruptions, with all of the variables of being on a plane. So before I show you the last project, one of the things I'll do to pack these items, just to make sure I feel good about getting through security, is I will take the needle tips off of the cord. I use interchangeable needles, and not everybody likes interchangeables. I like it because I think that it keeps my needles more organized. It's so much easier to put needle tips back into their slots in a case and coil the cords up. I know people that have circular needles out the wazoo. They have 50, 60, 100 pairs. It's really hard to find good storage for them. You coil them up, but you still need to know what size they are and what length the cord is. So I like being able to take needles apart after a project and put each part back into their labeled slot. And for travel, I think having interchangeable needles will be a boon. So I'm taking my T-pin and I'm inserting it into the little hole on the cord and unscrewing the needle tip. The reason I'm doing this is just so my knitting is even more inconspicuous. There aren't going to be needles sticking out of the project. Instead, it will just be a bit of fabric sitting on a cord with my Highland cattle holding it safely on each end. So there's that. It's not going anywhere. And now it really is just a bit of fabric I can fold up and have in the suitcase. And I'll put the needle tips in my pencil pouch in this, along with the pens I have. And I think that, I don't know, it just gives me peace of mind. It's not necessary. Oftentimes I go through security with a project fully intact with the needles sticking out of it right at the top of my bag. And there are no questions asked, it's fine. But if you are traveling somewhere where the security measures are a little more gray, it's not quite as clear what you can take or whether or not the agent on duty will say, yes, your knitting is fine, this is something that I like to do. I know a lot of people like to use bamboo or wood needles because they feel that it's less threatening. I really love to knit on my stainless steel Chow Goos, so this is what I'm going to do. And so now this is ready to pack. And once I'm through security, before I get on the plane, I'll put those needle tips back on, make sure they're tightened, and then I'm ready to have this right under the seat in front of me for my plane knitting. One more project to show you, and then it's time for me to go pack. All right, the last project I'm taking along is my test sea glass sweater. This is the one for Megan. And I'm working this out of DK weight wool. I'm using Andorra from Kelborn Woolens, and I don't have a tag in front of me, but it is part wool, part mohair, and I want to say it's also part alpaca, but I'll put it up on the screen. I'll say what it really is here as I'm editing. And I have a main color that I'm carrying through, which I think shows up pretty clearly here. And then I have 5 colors that I'm alternating on each row, one at a time, so for a sequence of 5 rows. And I have my little color card. When I do a project like this, once I decide the order of the colors, it's really helpful for me to have a color card that I create. I write down the number and the name of each color, and then I put a little strand of it through the card. And I'll tuck this in with my maker's board so it doesn't get crushed. And realistically, when I'm working on this for an extended period, when I have at least 20 minutes or 30 minutes to sit and knit, I'll probably get this out just to remind me of the color order as I go. It's a little bit harder to look at my rows here and tell exactly which one I used the last time. Some of these shades are very similar to each other, especially if I'm not sitting under and in front of very bright lights. So this is the last thing I'll take. Again, I wanted to start this before leaving the country, before getting on a plane, just to make sure that I liked the gauge, to make sure it was measuring out correctly, and to make sure I had a good handle of the pattern before I leave home and feel like, okay, what do I do now? So this is also on interchangeable needles. I'm going to knit some of this tonight after I finish filming, after I finish packing. This is what my reward is for the day. I'm going to sit, do a little bit of this, and then again, before I go on the plane, I'll unscrew those needle tips, move the stitch stoppers to the end of the cord, and have everything packed to get through security. So to sum it all up, I've got 3 projects. I've got one pretty small parcel of everything I could need, a backup set of everything in my suitcase, 1 folio with my patterns, and then 1 knitting bag. So I don't think it's ridiculous to bring all of this because, again, I'm gone for 6 weeks and I knit a lot. I don't want to run out. I also don't necessarily want to pick something at random on the trip and start it and finish it. I'm excited to get souvenir yarn. I'm really excited to come home with projects worth that I'll work on in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, but I don't necessarily want to start it immediately on the trip. So thank you so much for being part of this community. Thanks for being here with me. I'm still really surprised each time I post a video and people show up to watch. So thank you. This is fun for me. I'm really loving getting to know you all. So keep letting me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know about your must-have tools when you're knitting. And the next time I see you, most likely, I will be somewhere that feels a little more exciting than my crafting room here in Ohio. Even though this is a beautiful setting, this is a beautiful place to be, I'm excited to come to you with videos and content from hopefully some really, really beautiful and special places in the United Kingdom. So keep checking the channel. I'm going to keep posting every Saturday. It's my aim to keep posting on Wednesdays during the trip, but I might miss the first Wednesday. I never want to make content that feels completely aimless or something that doesn't feel genuine. I don't want to sit down and fabricate something or just talk at you. So maybe next Wednesday will be a live video. Maybe depending on the schedule, it'll be something I can put up. We'll see. But if I'm not with you on Wednesday, I'll keep posting on Saturdays during the trip. And if you have more trip suggestions, more questions, let me know in the comments. And if you don't feel like commenting here, you can always write to me on Ravelry. You can write to me on Instagram, and I'm happy to chat with you there. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to my Patreon supporters for making this happen, and I look forward to seeing all of you in future videos. Happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy crafting to you, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.